I thank you and welcome you all to the Show Me Your Money, a guide to your Segal Education Award. A couple things we would like to let you guys know about before we go ahead and get started. This is recording, so if you find yourself thinking, wow, this is a lot of information, I need to write this down, don't worry, you will be able to have access to this presentation in the future. It will be posted on the YouTube channel and shared on social media. So you will have access to it. You will also probably think, I have questions. The chat is open. You are more than welcome to write your questions in the chat. There will be multiple options throughout the presentation that will pause and give you a chance to have those questions answered for you. And then again, at the end, we'll have a period of time where we can have some Q&A. So without further ado, I am very excited to introduce our presenter, Marcia Hazen. She is the AmeriCorps Partnership Coordinator for us here in Michigan. Thank you for joining us, Marcia.
Absolutely, this is my pleasure. So I am going to share my screen with you all. Let me know, are you able to see my slides? All right, fantastic. Well, I just want to start off by giving you a little bit of information about why I'm so passionate about this particular topic. So I actually am an AmeriCorps alumni myself. I started my first year of service as an AmeriCorps Vista. And I was one of those kind of lone wolf Vistas in that I didn't have like a larger Vista program that I was a part of. And I was the only AmeriCorps member that was serving at my location, at my service site. And they didn't have a lot of experience with AmeriCorps. So I was trained regionally at the time. Vistas went to like Chicago and trained with a couple hundred other AmeriCorps Vistas from across the region. And there was some general information provided about the Education Award. And, you know, I had some student loan already. And I was like, okay, yep, when I finish my service term, I'm going to use my Education Award to pay down my student loans. And that was pretty much the gist of it. And I did my service term. And as soon as I, finished my AmeriCorps term of service, I went ahead and utilized my full Education Award towards my student loan debt. And at that point, I discovered some things that I did not know and wish that I had. And so when I decided to serve a second term, I did a year of AmeriCorps State and National. I was like, you know what, I'm going to learn absolutely everything that I can about this Education Award so that there are no surprises this time around and that I can get the most out of this benefit that I can. And actually, my husband was serving in AmeriCorps as well. And so we knew that we would have multiple Education Awards to kind of balance over the course of that time. So that's really why I got passionate about this topic. I decided to not only gather that information, but to share it with my cohort, with my team. And then when I became an AmeriCorps program director, I started sharing this information at Member Celebration as one of the workshops that we would present. So this is something that I think, everybody deserves to kind of do a deep dive into the AmeriCorps Education Award. So you really know kind of all the ins and outs and fine details so that you can make the best decisions with your particular circumstances. It is important to know that people do have a wide variety of circumstances that they're in. And so I'm not going to tell you exactly like how you should use your Education Award, but I do want to provide you with, like I said, really in-depth information so you can make the best decision for yourself. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started. So first, you may wonder why it's called the Segal AmeriCorps Education Award. And the reason for that is based on Eli Segal, who was the first CEO of the Corporation for National and Community Service. So now that's just known as AmeriCorps, the federal agency. So to honor Eli Segal, they named the Education Award in his honor. So it is called the Segal AmeriCorps Education Award. So the next thing to know about your education award is that the funds for your education award live inside of what's called the National Service Trust. The National Service Trust is basically like a bank account for AmeriCorps members, and it's where the education award funds and those interest accrual payments that we'll also talk about are stored for AmeriCorps members. So sometimes AmeriCorps members get really nervous about like the funding of AmeriCorps. So there have been years in the past where, you know, funding was on the chopping block and they weren't sure whether or not AmeriCorps would continue into existence. Now, AmeriCorps has been around for 27 years and we seem to have really strong support, and there's actual like increased investment going into national service right now. But if that were to change, it is important to know that during the year of service that you are doing, the funds for your education award and for those interest accrual payments are deposited into the National Service Trust and are there kind of waiting for you. So if funding were to dry up in the future, it wouldn't impact members who have earned their education awards already. So that's good to know and gives you a little reassurance, maybe if you have any anxiety or concerns about that. The next question that folks usually have is, how do I actually access my education award and those other benefits that are available to me? So you do that through the AmeriCorps Portal. So some of you maybe used the AmeriCorps Portal already when you applied to your AmeriCorps program, but different programs have different application processes. So you maybe don't have an AmeriCorps Portal account. If you don't have one already, you can go ahead and create it really at any point. It's my.americorps.gov, and you'll create an account in there. Now, if you haven't completed your term of service yet, excuse me, and haven't done previous AmeriCorps terms of service, you will not see your education award in there yet, because ultimately you don't earn your education award until after you successfully complete your term of service. So it's not going to show up as a benefit until after you've earned it. But you will need to go back to the AmeriCorps Portal in order to request those benefits. You can check your AmeriCorps education value and balance if you use a portion of it along the time. And also to request any payments for those of your education award to go either to an educational institution or to a student loan holder, which we'll talk about in detail throughout this presentation. And then also that interest accrual payment. So if you put your loans into forbearance during your AmeriCorps service term, when you successfully complete your AmeriCorps service term, you can request that interest be paid as well. And you do that through the AmeriCorps Portal too. All right, so we're going to start with some concepts that, you know, although they're not the education award themselves, they do kind of are interrelated. So I would like to cover those too. So first, I want to talk about the student loan forbearance. And it's important to understand that AmeriCorps only verifies an individual is serving in an approved national service position, but they are not actually the ones who approve or deny a forbearance request. It's your student loan holder that does that. And when I say student loan holder, that's the entity that is managing your student loan for you. So it is, you know, the student loan servicer. Sometimes you hear it referred to as that, but it's whatever kind of organization is holding your student loan, whether it's the Department of Education or a student loan servicer, or maybe even your school. So there's a lot of variety there as well. All right, so if your student loan holder tells you for whatever reason that your student loan does not qualify for forbearance based on your national service status, you could request to see if there were other opportunities for forbearance or deferment that you might be qualified for. So that's just important to be aware of. And that members whose student loans are in default may not be eligible for forbearance. So if members at that point are able to bring their student loans out of default, they can typically be able to put them into forbearance throughout their AmeriCorps service term. So that is one caveat. If your student loans happen to be in default, you may need to clear that up before they'd be eligible for that national service forbearance. All right. So if you have your student loans in forbearance during your AmeriCorps service term, when you successfully complete your national service term, then the National Service Trust will pay, and it's a quote, all or a portion of the interest that accumulated during your service term. And so the National Trust is the one that, again, is holding that the payment amount. And they only will pay interest on qualified student loans. And we will talk about what those are here in just a minute. So when people hear that all or a portion of their interest might be paid off by the National Service Trust, the next question is usually like, well, what is it? Is it all or is it a portion? Like, I'm concerned about whether or not they're going to pay for all of the interest that accrued on my student loans. So it really depends on your kind of status as a national service member. So if you are a member that's serving in a full-time service term, then the trust is typically going to pay 100% of the interest that accrues during your service term. But if you are somebody that's serving in a half-time position or in another type of position that's not full-time, or if you are a member that needs to exit out of AmeriCorps due to compelling personal circumstances and have received a prorated education award, then they may not be paying 100% of the interest that accrues, but they would typically pay a portion of it. So if you're a half-time member, they're typically going to pay half of the interest that accrued. And if you're somebody that needed to exit early, they would prorate that interest based on the amount of time that you served. So there is a formula that's lengthy that they use to determine that. But ultimately, it's based, again, on your member slot type and the length of your service period. And then it's really important to know that both the education award and these interest accrual payments are contingent on members successfully completing their service terms. So for those of you that are state and national members, it's important to understand that when you signed your member service agreement or your contract, you agree to a length of time that you're going to be serving, as well as a minimum number of hours that you will complete. So where people run into issues is if they do not meet those minimum number of hours. So for instance, when I was a program director, I had a member on my team who was serving a 1-year full-time service term, which was 1,800 service hours. So the member did serve for a full year, but the member was 12 hours short of that 1,800 service hour minimum. And unfortunately, that member, therefore, was not eligible for any of their education award or any of the interest accrual payments. So they don't prorate it if you don't meet that minimum number. Vistas, it's a little bit different because you all are serving for a full year in a full-time capacity, but there aren't particular numbers of hours that you're expected to serve besides within a full-time capacity. So it's less of an issue for Vistas. But for those of you that are state and national members, I want you to really be aware that what you've agreed to in your member service agreement is something that you need to keep in mind when it comes to your education award and for the interest accrual benefits. And that my recommendation is that you serve more hours than just that minimum number, and that you don't basically try to serve up into that amount, but no more, because there have been members that, you know, the last week of their service, somebody gets sick. And so they're a couple of hours less than they expect. Or sometimes there are hours that are unallowable based on, you know, doing some service activities that you weren't supposed to do that might get taken away. And those couple of hours usually don't make a difference. But if that's the difference between you making your minimum number of hours, that could make or break you receiving these benefits. So again, take that really seriously. Plan ahead. If you can serve a few extra hours just to be on the safe side, I highly recommend doing that. All right, so going back to the interest accrual, so how do you go about actually requesting those payments? So again, once you successfully complete your term of service and you've been exited by your program in eGrants, which is like the program side of the Americorps Portal, which may take a couple of weeks. So it doesn't happen like instantaneously on your last day. But once that has happened, usually within a couple of weeks, you can go into your Americorps Portal account, and then you'll have a link that you can click on to request an interest accrual payment. At that point, you'll need to enter information for your student loan holder, whether it's a student loan servicer or a lending school. It is a pick list, so you can type in some information and select it off of a pick list. And it's important to know that if you have more than one student loan in forbearance, that you'll want to repeat this process for each one of those loans so that you are getting your interest paid for each of the loans that was in forbearance. So that's important to keep in mind. And then Americorps as an entity has a best practice when it comes to like when to do your interest accrual payment versus an education award payment request. And what Americorps recommends is that you request your interest to be paid first, and then after that's processed, then requesting an education award payment. And the reason for that is just because you have a more accurate loan payoff amount, because you wouldn't want to use some of your education award towards interest that would ultimately be paid off in the interest accrual. So it's just good to do it in that particular order, though there's nothing that keeps you from doing it in whatever order that makes sense for you. So at this point, I want to open it up and see if anybody has questions about either putting loans into forbearance or any of those interest accrual payments before we move forward. All right, I will take the silence as no, and we will move forward. So next up, we're going to be talking about the Segal AmeriCorps Education Award, the reason that you are.
Sorry to interrupt you, Marcia. There is a question from Crystal. Crystal, if you want to unmute yourself, go ahead and ask your question.
Sure, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Sure can.
Okay, great. I'm using new headphones today, so I didn't know for sure.
Sure.
So I may have done something wrong, but this is my second year serving as a Vista.
Okay.
So I already have an education award, and I applied to have interest payment made to the school. But about a week ago, I found out that that request was rejected. Can you tell me, the person to whom I spoke at AmeriCorps, I actually just got off the phone with her. She couldn't tell me why it would be rejected. Now, maybe I did something wrong or something, but I don't know.
Okay, so let me just make sure that I'm hearing you correctly. So this is your second term of service.
Yes.
So you completed your first service term.
Yes.
And you've requested an interest accrual payment request.
Yes.
Okay. And did you make it through the Americorps portal?
Yes, I did.
You did. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But it came back as denied.
Yeah. See, the email that I received didn't say it was denied, but I had to call Americorps. They said there'd been a change in the email that I received from AmeriCorps just stated that there had been a change in my account.
Okay.
And it didn't tell me what it was, so I had to call them, and that's when the gal I spoke with told me that she thinks it's because my request had been denied.
Okay, so a couple of things that might have happened. So one is if your student loan has changed at all. So if sometimes like servicers will sell your student loan in a package to like a different student loan holder. So if that happened, the issue may be that they're trying to pay it to the old student loan holder instead of to the new student loan holder. Okay. That might be one of the issues. And then the other thing is that, so the student loan holder is the one that accepts those payments. So typically like AmeriCorps, unless there's a reason that your account shows that you didn't complete your term of service, that the student loan holder might have some confusion. So you might need to actually contact your student loan holder and figure out if they denied it for any reason and see if you can figure it out from that side.
So I would call the holder and not the school.
It depends on, yeah, because
okay,
it's for your student loan that's in forbearance. It's not the school.
Okay.
So that could be the other issue, is if you're asking them to pay the interest to the school and they should actually be paying the interest to the student loan holder.
I got you. That's good direction. Thank you. I'll check that out. I
Absolutely.
appreciate your time.
Yeah, certainly. Are there any other questions before we move forward? All right, so we're going to go over some kind of common basics about the Segal Education Award, and then we'll do a deep dive into using it for educational expenses and then for paying down student loans. So we'll be covering both. So the Segal AmeriCorps Education Award can be used to pay for either qualified student loans or for current educational expenses at an eligible educational institution, which is a mouthful. And so first, we're going to deep dive into what are qualified student loans, and then we'll talk about eligible educational institutions. So a qualified student loan is a loan that's backed by the federal government under Title IV of the Higher Education Act or under Title 7 or 8 of the Public Health Service Act, excluding PLUS loans. So these are the loans that typically parents take out for students. Qualified student loans also include student loans that are made by a state agency, including state institutions of higher education. If you are using any other form of credit or loans to pay for school, unfortunately, you cannot use your Segal AmeriCorps Educational Award to repay those kinds of loans. So if it was a personal loan, a credit card, anything like that, unfortunately, that's not going to work. But if you did fill out a FAFSA and you received federal student aid, typically those are the kinds of loans that you can use your education award towards. All right, and then what is an eligible educational institution? It is institutions of higher education that participate in the Department of Education's Title IV Student Aid Program, which is also referred to as Title IV schools. So this includes most post-secondary colleges, universities, community colleges, and technical schools. So career kind of technical schools where you get certificates and that kind of thing. So people are always like, well, I don't know if my school is a Title IV school or a school that I want to attend is a Title IV school. How do I find that out? Well, there is a list that's called the Federal School Code List that each one of those institutions is basically assigned a specific number by the Department of Education because they participate in Title IV federal student aid programs. So that Federal School Code List is available in an Excel format, which is fantastic. It is updated 4 times every single year on the 1st of February, May, August, and November. And I have included a link here to access it, but you can also, Google Federal School Code List to find it as well. So if a school is a Title IV school, it will be included on this list. The Education Award can also be used if you are somebody that has served in the military and are a veteran for GI Bill approved programs, including programs of education, apprenticeship, or job training that are under the Montgomery GI Bill or the post 9/11 GI Bill. And to find a list of these schools and institutions, as a veteran, you would need to go through the Department of Veteran Affairs to access those GI Bill approved programs and schools. All right, any questions at this point?
Yes, Marcia. So the links that you are providing in your slides, we will be sending out a follow-up email with some information. It's possible to send those links as well.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
And there's a handout that we have as well that will have all of those details on there for you too.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to get into some education award details for you guys. So first of all, it's really important to understand that when education award payments are made, they are sent directly to either your student loan holder or to the school that you are attending. AmeriCorps does not send the payment to you for you to then distribute to one of those two entities. So be aware that that money is never coming directly to you. The second thing to know is that members have 7 years from the point of earning their education award before it expires, okay? And again, you earn your education award upon successful completion of your AmeriCorps service term. So it's at the end of your service term when that clock starts. The education award payments are considered taxable income the year that it is used or a portion of it is used. And that was the information that I did not know. And when I was in AmeriCorps Vista many years ago, at the time, Vistas were not allowed to have any other source of income or like a side hustle or anything like that. And so I had depleted all of my, personal finances throughout my AmeriCorps Vista service term. And when I finished my AmeriCorps service term, I put my entire education award towards my student loans. And what I was not prepared for was the taxable, that being taxable income. So I used my education award all in one big chunk, and then tax season came around and I was shocked by the amount of taxes that I owed and had not landed a lucrative job. And so really just wasn't prepared to pay that amount in taxes. And had I known better, I maybe would have waited a year or two to use my education award in total, or spread it out over the course of a couple of years so that taxable responsibility would be spread out over a couple of years as well. So that's something that some people don't realize, and I want to make sure that you are aware of that. Another basic to know about your education award is that members can earn the equivalent of 2 full education awards, and then you're maxed out. So for members that serve 2 full-time terms, you can earn 2 full education awards. Members that serve in half-time or quarter-time or shorter terms, you can serve more terms to earn the equivalent of 2 full education awards. So even if you're only earning a smaller education award, you can serve more service terms to ultimately earn the equivalent of 2 full education awards, if that makes sense. Members can use their education award all at once if you'd like to, or you can divide it up and use portions of it at different times between the point that you earn the award and the time that it expires. You can use some of it towards educational expenses, some of it towards student loans, whatever mix makes sense for you. And then another thing that we're going to cover is that the education award can be transferred to a family member, but only certain circumstances. So unfortunately, Vista members, you are not eligible for this option. This is only for members of state and national programs. And the big caveat is that you need to be at least 55 years old at the start of your service to be eligible for that. And we're going to do a deep dive here in a second. But I want to pause and see if there are any questions over the education award basics that we covered.
You have one question, Marcia, from Amanda Schrader. She asks about how much of the education award is taxed. She plans to use both of hers over the next year for graduate school.
Yeah, so we are going to cover kind of how you can estimate that tax implication. Taxes are super complicated, if you probably know, and it depends on a lot of different factors, including kind of what tax bracket you're in, if you have other income coming in, and so forth. So I can't give you an estimate, but I will share with you a way that you can kind of estimate it for yourself. So we will get there in a minute.
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
Okay. You just mentioned something about being 55 and older when you start your service. Could you repeat that, please?
Yep. Actually, my next slide is doing a deep dive into that because it is a little bit more. So for those that are state and national members that are at least 55 years old before beginning their term of service, they can transfer their education award to a child, stepchild, foster child, grandchild, or step-grandchild. The education award can only be transferred to an individual who is also a US citizen, national, or lawful permanent resident. So somebody that would ultimately be eligible to serve themselves as an AmeriCorps member. And then the recipient of that transfer, so the person that's receiving the transferred education award, they have 10 years from the date that the award was earned by the service member to use it. So it's really important to understand that if you have like an infant grandchild, that it probably doesn't make sense to transfer them an education award, because by the time 10 years rolls past, they may still be too young to actually use it for higher education. So you have to keep that in mind. The other thing is that you can only transfer each award to one person, and it can only be transferred one time. So my little joke is that you have to pick your favorite child or grandchild to transfer it to, because you can't split it between more than one recipient. If you happen to earn more than one education award, you could transfer one education award to one child or grandchild and the second education award to a different child or grandchild, but you can't split up one education award to multiple recipients. Does that answer your questions, Crystal?
Yes, it most certainly does. Thank you.
Fantastic. Yep. All right. Another thing that's important to understand is that AmeriCorps, although I think they do send out an email to you to let you know that your education award is almost going to expire within like the next 6 months or so, many of us use an email at the beginning of our service that, 7 years down the line, we don't check anymore, or we've moved on from that email address. So many people do not receive any kind of reminders about claiming their AmeriCorps benefits. So again, those interest accrual benefits or their education award. So if you're somebody who may kind of, out of sight, out of mind, forget about these things, you want to make sure that you do your due diligence to remind yourself to request your interest accrual payment if you have your loans in forbearance, and to utilize your education award before it expires. So use whatever method to remind yourself, because you don't want to leave these benefits on the table and not get the full benefit of your service experience. All right, one other thing that I want to cover before we kind of jump deeper into how to use your education award is that there are education award extensions that are available. So if you are somebody who decides to complete a subsequent term of AmeriCorps service, or you serve in the Peace Corps or in the military, or you have some kind of extenuating circumstance that you may want to request an extension for, so a serious illness, injury, disability, a natural disaster, something like that, you can officially apply for an extension for your education award for the amount of time that those circumstances would have kept you from utilizing your award. So for instance, if you do a subsequent term of service, you've already earned one education award, you can request an extension for your first education award that covers the amount of time that you served a subsequent national service term, or for the amount of time that you served in the Peace Corps or in the military, for instance. It is important to know that you have to apply for the extension prior to your education award expiration date. So you can't retroactively ask for an extension. But if you want an extension or are eligible for one, you will need to request it in the Americorps Portal. When you have an education award, you'll have a Americorps or My Education Award link that you can click on, and then there's an option for award extension request. You will need to provide some supporting documentation for whatever circumstances that you needed an extension for. And again, they will review and either approve or deny that extension request. All right, so moving on to the tax implications. So this is something that is high on most people's minds. So one thing to be aware of is that the trust does not withhold taxes from your education award or interest accrual payment, right? So they make the education award payment or interest accrual payment in the total amount that you request or the total amount that you're eligible for. And then you are responsible for paying taxes come tax season of the following calendar year. So if you have an education award or interest accrual payments, or a combination of the two, within a calendar year that total more than $600, then AmeriCorps will send you an IRS Form 1099 to be used when you're preparing your taxes. Now, the caveat to that is that if you spend $599 or less of your education award or interest accrual payment, you are still expected to pay taxes on that amount. You just will not receive that 1099 form with that amount listed. So you'd be responsible for keeping track of that yourself. But again, how do you go about like estimating how much your tax burden might be based on utilizing a portion or all of your education award or awards? The best recommendation that I've come up with is to consult a tax professional. So they're gonna do the math for you and help you figure that out. Or you can download a 1040 form and figure it out yourself. So if you do that, basically what you would do is fill it out with all of your kind of earnings and details and see what your taxes would be like that, and then fill it out again and include the amount that you're requesting or are considering requesting in your education award and see what the difference is. So that's the best way to kind of estimate your tax burden yourself. All right, so I'm gonna pause again right there and see if there are any questions before we move on to our next topic. So we're gonna dive into how to use your education award to pay specifically for current educational expenses, and then we will cover paying down student loans. So kind of before we jump way into it, I do want to make sure that you all are aware of the Schools of National Service program. It used to be called Matching Institutions, but it's been rebranded this year. So roughly 200 colleges and universities across the country have committed to providing incentives to AmeriCorps alums, and therefore are designated schools of national service. So they have decided to either match all or a portion of the Segal AmeriCorps Education Award that members or alums use at their school, or they provide scholarships or fellowships to AmeriCorps alums, or they provide priority points for admission, or some provide in-state tuition for alums that are coming to them from out of state, or they could pay for your books and supplies, or some other kind of personal expenses. Some are offering academic credit to AmeriCorps members for their experience, or even letting members that are enrolling into AmeriCorps defer their enrollment for a 1-year period. So there are lots and lots of benefits to be aware of, and definitely look into if you are considering using your education award at an institution, because you may have some additional benefits that you can utilize. So how do you know if your school is a school of national service? Well, there is a searchable list that you can access at americorps.gov, and you can search by the school name, or you can search by state. So if you're deciding where to go to school, this is a nice place to come and look and see kind of who's offering incentives to AmeriCorps. Or if you already have a school of choice, you can look and see if they're currently on the list. If your school of choice is not on the list, AmeriCorps and those of us from the state service commissions encourage you to reach out to that school and invite them to become a school of national service. And especially if you're getting ready to provide them with your, dollars for education, they might be more inclined to decide to join to incentivize your attending their school. So AmeriCorps has a variety of resources that are available to help you make that ask of your school or potential school. So there are like templates and informational packets. It's really quite simple for the schools to sign up once they have agreed that they are willing to provide an incentive. So it's a pretty easy door for them to open for you. And then they provide a variety of kind of offices within the school that make sense to reach out to ask specifically about that. So another thing to be aware of is if you're interested in using your education award at an institution of higher education, that it's not limited to just degree only or certificate seeking educational experiences. So sometimes people are like, hey, I have this education award, but I already paid off my student loans. I'm not really, needing to go back to school, like I don't want to just waste this. I'm not 55, I can't transfer it. What do I do? Think outside the box. So you could definitely take a course or two at a community college, a career technical school, or college or university. As long as it's a Title IV school, you can use your education award to pay for that experience. So think of photography classes, dance classes, culinary arts, anything that you're interested in, would want to do. More than likely you could use your education award money to do that. If you're somebody that likes being outdoors and leadership education through outdoor experiences, there are Outward Bound and the National Outdoor Leadership Schools that both accept AmeriCorps Education Awards for payment of their outdoor kind of leadership wilderness expeditions. National Outdoor Leadership School is a School of National Service as well, but they only match if it's a longer term, like a semester long experience. So if it's a shorter term, they have like 2-week programs and things like that. They don't match those, but they do match the longer ones. You can also use your education award to study abroad in a couple of different ways. So you can either enroll in a study abroad program at a Title IV school, so an American school that has a study abroad program, or there are programs that are called student exchange programs where an international school basically partners with a Title IV higher education institution in the United States, and you actually go to the other institution, the international institution, but you're paying your tuition through that Title IV school in the US. And so that's another way that you may be able to utilize your education award to study abroad if that's something that you're interested in doing. Another thing to be aware of when it comes to using your education award for school is that you can only use your education award for current educational expenses. So you can't use it to cover a past balance on a school account. What AmeriCorps considers current educational expenses is that you're enrolled in the program while you're in AmeriCorps, but not prior to being in AmeriCorps. But if you were to have taken out a loan, then obviously you could use your education award to repay that qualified student loan. So there are options there as well. So this is another piece that a lot of people are unaware of, and it's really important to know about. So if you are somebody that's looking to go to school in the future and you need to fill out your FAFSA, there is a trick in knowing how to fill it out that can basically take your AmeriCorps earnings and have it basically not count against you towards your cost of attendance. So let me walk you through what that looks like. So about halfway through the FAFSA, there is a section that's labeled Student Financial Information Continued. You'll want to click on that option that says Grants and Scholarship Aid reported to the IRS. And in there, you can list all of your AmeriCorps earnings from the previous calendar year. So when you're filling out the FAFSA, you're using earnings from the previous calendar year. So if you were in AmeriCorps any of the time during that previous calendar year and received a living allowance, or had an education award payment, or an interest accrual payment that happened in that previous year, you'll want to add those details in that section. Because what it's ultimately going to allow is the financial aid office can then subtract that amount from your total income and adjust your total gross income to help you be basically able to get a better financial aid package. So it basically, just like your AmeriCorps earnings don't count against you when it comes to like food assistance benefit eligibility, it's the same kind of concept because it's not earnings, it's a living allowance, it's education award benefits. Those don't count officially as income when it comes to your FAFSA application either, but only if you put it in the Student Financial Information Continued section. So please be aware of that. So for instance, if your only source of income during that previous calendar year was your AmeriCorps living allowance, for financial aid purposes, your adjusted gross income may be as little as $0. So in that case, you might be eligible for a lot of grants and things that you wouldn't necessarily have to pay back. So that's a really great way to kind of leverage your AmeriCorps experience to help you get even more money for college. This is kind of an old slide, but in addition to the schools of national service, know that there are other benefits that might be available to you. So some schools will waive an application fee for an AmeriCorps member or alum. The GRE, if you're looking to go to graduate school and you're an AmeriCorps member or alum, you can get a fee reduction certificate based on your AmeriCorps status. And then there's also National Service Graduate Fellowship. So there's lots of benefits. Even if your school isn't on that list of schools of national service, definitely reach out to the financial aid office and ask if there are any benefits for AmeriCorps members or alums, just to see. All right, so a couple of things to be aware of when it comes to financial aid and how that works is what's called cost of attendance. So each school, so the college or university, decides each year what their cost of attendance is. So this isn't for each individual student, but this is a number that kind of they publish that says, like, in general, this is how much it costs to attend our school. And it's not just tuition and fees. It can also be room and board, books, supplies, transportation, and that kind of thing. So AmeriCorps members and alums, you can use your education award for any cost that's determined to be cost of attendance at your school. So it's not just limited to tuition. And then there's the expected family contribution. So this is the amount that the student or their family, if you're still a dependent, are expected to contribute towards the cost of your education. And this is based on your income and assets from the previous calendar year. So again, this is why filling out your FAFSA and making sure to put your AmeriCorps earnings on in that specific section will help reduce your expected family contribution. And then your need is the difference between the cost of attendance and your expected family contribution. So this concept is important to be aware of because there is an issue that's called over award status that you want to be cautious around. This is not something that happens to a lot of folks, but it is something that pops up sometimes. So I want to make sure that it's on your radar. So basically, what is over award status? So if a student receives more aid than his or her financial need, it puts them into over award status. So for instance, when the total of a financial aid package is received by the student exceeds the student's need, then the student's financial aid package has to be adjusted by canceling or reducing it in order to eliminate that over award. So oftentimes what triggers this to happen is that as an AmeriCorps alumni doesn't let the school know that they're planning on using their education award, and they take a full package of student aid, which meets their total need. And then they also put in a request for their education award to put money in, towards their education. And the two of those things together might push you over that amount of what your need is calculated as. And then the school has to reduce down your financial aid package. So that's something that you want to avoid if at all possible. So basically, you just want to make sure that you are being upfront with your financial aid counselor and let them know that you have an AmeriCorps Education Award, but you don't want to use it if it might cause you to lose aid. So just working with your financial aid counselor goes a long way to avoiding over award status. All right, so as I mentioned, AmeriCorps members and alums can use their education award to pay for anything that's considered cost of attendance. And so sometimes you may have heard that members are able to purchase like a laptop computer, for instance, with their education award. And folks are usually like, well, how do I go about doing that if the money goes to my school and not to me? Like, how does that work? So basically, some schools may allow an increase of cost of attendance in a given year for a student to pay for supplies and equipment, such as a computer. So you'll just want to talk to your financial aid office about what their policy is, because it does vary from school to school, and let them know that you'd like to use some of your education award for the purchase of a computer, for instance, or some other kind of equipment. and have them kind of walk you through what that process would look like. So again, ultimately the money does arrive at your school, but then your school may cut you a check so that you can use the money for something like a laptop or for room and board if you're living off campus or something like that. And then the last piece, and then I'll ask if you guys have any questions, is that by law, the education award payments that are going to educational institutions are made into installments, right? So this is a little known fact that people don't often know about. And so the way that they identify that is that half of the installment will be paid, or one of the installments will be paid at the beginning of the enrollment period, and the second will be at the middle of the enrollment period. So sometimes members ask for an education award payment to go to their school, and only half of it shows up, and then the members are panicked that something went wrong. This is just how it works, and by law, how it has to work. So most schools, again, AmeriCorps has been around for 27 years. Most schools have dealt with a lot of AmeriCorps Education Awards and are familiar with this process. But if you run into this issue and they're like, hey, we only got half of your education award, what's the deal? This is what the deal is. And the second portion of that education award payment will come at the mid-enrollment period, which is a date that they provide in that process. All right, so I will take any questions that you all might have before we move on to using your education for student loans. All right. So we're going to start off with some student loan basics just to make sure we're all on an even playing field when we talk about these concepts. So for student loans, or really any kind of loans, there is principal and there is interest. So principal is the amount that you are borrowing, and then interest is money that's added to the principal that you pay back. So it's the money that the lender gets to keep. And it's the reason that they loan you the money in the first place, right? So they're making money off of loaning you the dollars because you are paying back more than you actually borrowed in interest. All right. So when we talk about using your education award to repay a student loan, it's important to understand that you're not going to be basically connecting your education award to your monthly student loan payments and having the National Trust pay your monthly student loan payments for you, okay? That is not how it works. Instead, you are going to put in a request through the Americorps Portal for an amount of your choice. Again, it could be all of your education award. It could be a smaller portion of it. And then that's considered a lump sum, right? It's going to typically be more than 1 monthly payment for your student loan, okay? And you're going to have that amount basically sent from the National Service Trust to your student loan holder on your behalf to be used towards your student loan debt. All right, so when your student loan holder receives that lump sum payment, they can apply it in one of two ways. One happens really automatically, and then one would take a little bit more determination on your side if you're interested in doing it that way. I'm gonna walk you through both repayment options and give you kind of pros and cons of each strategy, I guess. All right. So the first way that the lump sum payment is applied to your student loan is by advancing your payments, okay? So basically, when your student loan holder, your lender, receives that lump sum education award payment, what they typically do, and kind of automatically do, is to take that amount of lump sum and apply it towards the however many student loan payments that amount would cover, okay? And this amount, or this option, basically allows you as an individual to take a little vacation from paying your student loans, because ultimately, however many months the lump sum payment covers means that you don't have to pay those monthly payments because they've already been paid on your behalf, okay? And I have an example to kind of show you what that looks like. So I used round numbers just to make this as easy as possible for everybody to see math-wise. So let's say that your student loan payment is a reasonable $200 a month, and you request to have $5,000 of your education award payment sent to your student loan holder. Basically, the lender will use that $5,000 to cover 25 monthly payments of $200, right? So you as an individual get to take a student loan kind of payment break for 25 months in this particular scenario, right? Because it covers 25 monthly payments based on the amount of your student loan and the amount of your education award that you requested. Are there any questions on this math or understanding this concept? All right, so some things to consider about the advanced payment option is that there is a downside to this, and that is that the total loan balance may not change substantially. And the reason for this, and I guess the reason that the student loan holders typically go this route is that with that lump sum payment, they apply it to interest first and then to principal. So the money that they get to keep on top of the principal is what they apply that lump sum payment towards first, right? And so over the course of your kind of total loan, they're paying a larger portion typically of the interest versus the principal. So yeah, that's the reason that they do it in that particular way. Now, going back to like, well, why might you still want to do that route? So for somebody like myself, for instance, when I finished my AmeriCorps service term, I didn't necessarily have a job lined up. I wasn't making a lot of money. And so just the peace of mind of not having to make a student loan payment for 6 months, for a year, whatever amount of time that made sense for me, was a nice kind of way to go about things. So I wouldn't have to stress out about making student loan payments for whatever amount of time made sense for my circumstances. So for you, if that's something that, you just want to give yourself that peace of mind, and you don't want to have to worry about making student loan payments for a period of time, that could be a really great option for you. Now, most student loan holders will still allow their borrowers to continue to make payments without penalty, even if they have advanced your payments, right? So if you make a lump sum payment with your education award and you still want to contribute maybe $25 a month or $100 a month or whatever random amount that you come into, you can make smaller or less frequent payments during that time and continue to pay down your student loan debt. So that's another way to kind of continue to chip away at the principal if you want to go this route. All right. The second option is when you have that lump sum sent over, that you could ask for them to apply that entire lump sum payment to principal rather than advancing your payments. And ultimately, it would help reduce the loan balance because the less principal you have means the less you're accruing interest, right? So the pros are that you're going to be paying less total money for your student loan over the course of the life of the loan going this route because you're paying down principal, so you're accumulating interest slower, right? Or in a smaller amount of total interest. The con or the negative aspect of this is you get zero student loan vacation, right? So if they receive that lump sum payment and they apply it only to the principal, regardless of how big that payment is, the very next month, you are going to get another student loan statement and they're going to expect you to make your regular monthly payment, okay? So you get zero break doing it this way. If you are interested in paying down the principal, and this is actually what I ended up doing with a portion of my second education award, you have to contact the lender ahead of time and let them know, hey, I'm getting ready to have the education award payment in whatever the amount is sent over to you, and I want that entire amount to be applied to the principal. You'll want to keep notes about that conversation that you have, the date and time that you made that contact, who you spoke to. And then it's also a best practice to ask them for written confirmation. So it could be an email confirmation, or they can send you something in the mail. Because ultimately what happened in my circumstance, and I've heard that it's happened to others, is that even after you had that call, you said, hey, I want my lump sum to be applied only to my principal. When they received that lump sum payment, they still advanced out my payments and didn't put it towards my principal. So I actually had to contact them again and say, hey, remember we spoke on such and such a date. I asked that you would apply the lump sum only to the principal, and they had to reverse that transaction for me. So if you go this route, kind of be ready to follow up and be persistent. Keep an eye out on any student loan statements that you receive. And if you see that you have a date further out for when your next payment is due, that's an indication that they didn't apply it to your principal. So you may need to be more persistent in that particular circumstance. All right, another thing that I want to touch base on is consolidating student loans. So especially now when interest rates are really low, it might make sense for you to consolidate student loans to get a better interest rate. But a couple of things to keep in mind. One is that you want to make sure whatever the new loan is, that consolidated loan, is a qualified student loan that's backed by the federal government. If you were to consolidate two qualified student loans into a new loan that is not qualified, you won't be able to use any of your education award towards that new consolidated loan. So that's something you definitely don't want to do. You'll want to avoid that at all costs. Also, if you're consolidating during your AmeriCorps service term, AmeriCorps recommends that you work with the National Service Trust every step along the way so that they can still pay off the interest that accrues on your student loan. So once you kind of make it a new loan, if interest is accruing on that loan, they may not consider that a student loan that they are going to pay interest payments towards. So you just want to be very cautious and work with the National Service Trust if it's something that you're looking to do specifically during your AmeriCorps service term. All right, other things to keep in mind is that there are income-driven repayment plans out there. So again, if you are looking at your student loan debt and the amount that you're paying on a monthly basis and it seems unreasonable and unaffordable to you, please look into income-based repayment options that are based on your family size and income. And there may be a plan that could help reduce the amount that you're paying on a monthly basis to be more affordable to you. And then lastly, I want to let you know about VITA. VITA is Volunteer Income Tax Assistance. It is a program that provides free income tax preparation for individuals and families earning up to $57,000 annually, people with disabilities and limited English proficiency. And I've utilized VITA quite a few times and had a really positive experience. So you get to meet either one-on-one or virtually these days with somebody who's been specifically trained by the IRS to provide income tax assistance to individuals from lower-ish income like families in order for them to take advantage of all the tax credits that they're eligible for. They provide VITA services in a lot of different community locations. So it can be community centers, libraries, schools, churches, and so forth. If you're interested in utilizing VITA services now or in the future, you can either Google it or there's a number that I've provided as well to locate a VITA service in your community. They typically have evening hours, weekend hours, and we're an absolute pleasure to help me, figure out my taxes. So I definitely encourage looking into that if that's something that you might be able to benefit from. There are some resources that are available to you. So AmeriCorps has an Education Award FAQ that goes through a lot of the information that I've provided today during this presentation. So you can access it on their website at americorps.gov. The National Service Trust or the National Service Hotline, is available for you to call and ask questions on. They have individuals that are knowledgeable about the Education Award nitty-gritty details, and they can help kind of look into things on your behalf and help you figure out strategy, or if you run into a hiccup, they can help you figure out why. And then if you're new to a FAFSA or figuring out your student financial aid packages, there's some really great guides available on finaid.org. There are others available too, but that's one that I know that's a really great resource. All right, so I'm going to open it up for questions. Again, feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question, or we can take them from the chat box as well.
So we actually have a question in the chat asking if the Segal Award is in a way a form of income instead of a scholarship, because they have never been taxed on previous scholarships before.
Yeah, I mean, it's not considered a scholarship. It's considered an education award specific to AmeriCorps, and in the statutes and all of the legal stuff that, is involved with creating that in the beginning, it was indicated that it is taxable income. Again, not the year that you earn it, because it's still sitting in the National Trust, but when you actually have it paid out, it's considered taxable income the year that it's used. There has been a lot of advocacy done on AmeriCorps members' behalves to change that. So maybe that'll change in the future, but currently the way that it's written into the law is that you do have to pay taxes on that amount. Other questions?
So Emily asked, if funding were to dry up during your service, would you still get an education award? So if you hadn't gotten it yet.
Yeah, so the way that funding works for AmeriCorps is that there's like congressional appropriations. So the money to support the programs is awarded prior to any AmeriCorps members enrolling. So that money is there before you're even given a slot to be an AmeriCorps member. So if funding were to dry up during your AmeriCorps service term, it would impact AmeriCorps members in future service years, not in the current service year.
We have another question asking, is the education award deducted by the interest paid while the loan is in forbearance during your service?
Whoever asked that, if you'd be willing to unmic yourself, I'd love to have a conversation about that. I don't know if I understand what you're asking exactly.
Oh, sorry about that. Earlier on in the presentation, and by the way, everything you outlined is crystal clear, so I'm absolutely positive you went over this. I just might have walked out of the room or something, but you're really good at outlining all of the micro details. So so we talked about how we can put our loan in forbearance so that it's not accruing interest. And then we talked about how after we finish that term, then that will work to get that interest accrued paid. Right?
Yeah, so the caveat or the portion that you misunderstood was when you put your loan into forbearance, it means you don't have to make monthly payments, that the payments stop, but the interest continues to accrue.
Correct.
Yeah, so that's why that benefit is there, so that AmeriCorps members don't enter service, put their loans into forbearance, and then have the interest accrue during their service term without being paid. So that's why that interest accrual benefit is available, because they know that your interest is going to continue to accrue, and they want you to kind of start and stop your service term with the same amount of student loan debt that you came into it.
So the question is, I think I understand that statement, definitely, but let's say, I don't know, let's say my education award is $5,000. I'm just, for example,
Sure.
Then, and I'm not ready to use it for an education award. When it comes time to pay off that interest, which has accrued because it always does accrue, will they take that amount out of that hypothetical $5,000?
I see what you're saying. Yeah, I didn't actually mention this and I should have, so I appreciate the question. These are two separate benefits. The interest accrual benefit is its own thing, and then your education award is separate. So they're not deducting any money from your education award to pay that interest. That is an additional benefit on top of that.
Okay.
So make sure that you're requesting that interest to be paid, and then you can use whatever portion of your education award as well. So it's two separate benefits.
I think you said it in your last paragraph, is you said that they don't want you to pay interest during the time you're doing service. So they, put it back, they freeze it basically to where it was when you started service. And that's where you get to start after you finish service. So I get it.
Yeah, they don't want members digging themselves into a deeper hole in order to do national service. So they understand that while your loans are in forbearance, you don't have to pay them, but they will continue to, have interest accrue. And that's why the interest accrual payment exists, so that you're paying that off on your behalf.
Well, thank you so much for being so clear. Student loans are always a topic that make me get kind of faint and dizzy and have a panic attack.
I hear you.
This has been so confidence building. So thank you.
Awesome. Good.
I've got just kind of a follow-up question regarding that.
Sure.
So I know for me, for loan forbearance, I don't think I did it through AmeriCorps. I know that with the pandemic, some of them went into forbearance like kind of by themselves.
Right.
So if you didn't do it through AmeriCorps, will it still pay that interest accrual, or will it be not eligible since it was done through who knows what?
Yeah, so AmeriCorps should still provide an interest accrual payment for the interest, again, that only accrued during your service term. So let's say that the pandemic put your loans into forbearance before you started your AmeriCorps service term. They're not going to pay for the interest that started accruing at that point. But from the start date of your service till the end date of your service, any interest that accrued during that portion, absolutely, yes, they will pay that down.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
And just a caveat, so I worked with an individual who had been in AmeriCorps and successfully completed a term of service, and was unaware that there was an interest accrual benefit at all, and was several years out of AmeriCorps when they heard this presentation and went, oh crap, can I request an interest accrual payment like a year or two later? And I was like, I don't know, but try it. And they did. And sure enough, they paid off that interest accrual as well. So I don't know what the cutoff date for that is, but if it's something that maybe you've already earned an education award and you had loans in forbearance that first term, if you haven't already requested an interest accrual payment, go ahead and do that, because there's a good chance that they'll pay it. Other questions? Do we have anything in the chat, or do people want to unmute and ask?
There was nothing additional in the chat, Marcia, but Lily did mention that she thought this should be part of onboard training for all new AmeriCorps members. So
I hear ya. And it's something that, I think sometimes at the beginning of your service term, there's just so much information coming at you that it doesn't necessarily soak in as well. So I find that usually, members that are partway through their service term really gather this information and retain it better. But again, yeah, I totally agree, and different programs, have different approaches to this, disseminating this knowledge, and some do a really great job of it. But again, other programs that maybe are newer to AmeriCorps, maybe just don't have this knowledge base themselves. All of the information that's covered in this was found, is available out in the World Wide Web and on AmeriCorps websites and things like that. It's just dedicating the time and pulling all that information together that folks don't often do. So it is, again, something that I'm super passionate about because I know firsthand what it's like to be surprised after the fact. And it is my kind of personal mission to let AmeriCorps members know about their benefits and help you understand them in a deep way as much as possible so that you guys can really get the most out of those benefits.
I have a question, Marcia. Sure. It's Alex from Cherry Health.
Hey, Alex.
So with the new branding of not having Vistas and becoming just AmeriCorps members, whether that be senior or regular, how is that going to affect, say, the family being able to give your education award to maybe a family member because it was only for state national members, but there will not be state national members? And just if you could go over that a little bit.
Yeah, I hear you. Okay, so very, very good question, Alex. So yes, AmeriCorps has rebranded over this past year or so and, replaced the logo and has really moved more towards having a unified national service AmeriCorps brand, I guess. But it is important to understand that there are still different types of AmeriCorps programs that are governed by different statutes and laws. So some history. So VISTA actually goes back to like the 1960s during the War on Poverty, before AmeriCorps was even created. So when AmeriCorps was created in the 90s, VISTA sort of got rolled in. But there are different laws that govern VISTA than there are that govern AmeriCorps state and national, others that are over top of NCCC and AmeriCorps senior programs. So even though the branding is trying to make us a more unified, just AmeriCorps, the laws and the statutes that oversee each of the individual kinds of programs are still in place currently.
Awesome, that makes so much sense. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments? If you've used your education award and had a positive or negative experience and you want to share that, I'm open to having you share as well. I'm literally hearing crickets at my house. So anyways, it was, wonderful to have all of you all join us today. Again, this is a recorded session. It will be posted on YouTube. It will be like a public facing YouTube video. So you will be able to search it, years after you're finished with your AmeriCorps term of service. We also have an old presentation, but we're going to update it on the Michigan Community Service Commission website as a resource. It's under member resources. So you can access that information there as well. And we will follow up and provide you some additional links and details too. So thank you all for taking the time to learn about all the nitty-gritty details of your education award. And again, we appreciate all the service that you do to make the world a better place. Thank you so much for serving during such a crazy time.
Yes, thank you. And just again, a reminder that you will be receiving a post-presentation email with all of the links included and along with some other resources. And as always, if you have any questions, please reach out to Marcia or myself. I, along with Joe and Samantha, are part of the LeaderCorps team that brought this presentation to you today. So feel free to reach out to any of us as well. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Marcia, for all your...
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. It's my pleasure. Love sharing this information.